So anyway, one album we're going to talk about now, which I think everybody agrees is an undisputed masterpiece from the era, and obviously one of your favourite.
Dark Side of the Moon?
No, well, that is an undisputed masterpiece, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going
Tubular Bells.
No, we're going to talk about Roxy Music, For Your Pleasure, the second Roxy Music album. Now, I have many friends who probably consider this to be the greatest achievement of all time, and I think you would put it up there too, wouldn't you?
It's certainly my favourite Roxy Music album, and yeah, it would be in a list of favourite all-time albums.
Well, listen, I love the album too. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here too. I can say what I like about it, and then you can be much more eloquent about it than I can. But what I like about it is it's kind of still got that sort of slightly glam element. I love glam rock. I love this sort of period of, we're coming out of the glumness of the sort of, blues rock of the late 60s and the way that kind of developed into the early 70s. And we're coming out of that into something much more kind of exotic and flamboyant and glamorous. But at the same time, it's got that kind of art school mentality with people like Eno and his EMS synthesizer and Bowie and his art school upbringing. So it's really the beginnings of what I suppose a lot of people would call art rock, isn't it? Is that fair to say? Is this beginning of art rock?
I think it is fair to say, yeah.
This and 10cc,
I think it's... Well, 10cc obviously were making very good albums at this point as well. I mean, it was their debut release this year. But the 10cc album was much more about pastiche, at least their debut was. I think sheet music was a far greater
But isn't this
statement.
too? Hasn't this also got... I know that the first Roxy Music album has got a lot of what you would call pastiche in it.
The first Roxy
50s
album
rock and roll.
has.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about it is it draws from almost 20s pop music and 50s rock and roll and subverts it in a 1970s glam way. It's got quite a murky, almost Todd Rundgren-esque production, that debut album, which perhaps gets in the way of the enjoyment.
Not anymore.
But I like the debut album.
Not anymore.
Pardon?
Since I remixed it, it sounds stunning. It sounds anyway, I'm joking, of course.
I've got that remix.
You thought it was a load of shit, didn't you? You'd rather listen to the original,
I thought,
wouldn't you?
as old Mr. Grace would say, you did very well.
Thank you very much. With a couple of buxom women on either side of him. Anyway, so I've interrupted you. For Your Pleasure, tell us why this is why is this the pinnacle of the Roxy catalogue? What makes it the pinnacle of the Roxy catalogue?
Well, interestingly enough, to deviate, because we like to deviate, Eno thinks it isn't the pinnacle of the Roxy catalogue. For him, it's actually Stranded. It's the album that followed this, because he felt that they took the experimentation from For Your Pleasure and managed effortlessly to turn it into something that was more commercially honed. And he's right. I mean, Stranded, which I think might have also been 1973.
I don't know, but I don't think there's many people that would agree with... I mean, maybe he's just...
Mother of Pearl.
Yeah, no, listen, I love that album, but The Bogus Man, In Every Dream Home a Heartache...
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is the last Roxy Music, perhaps with the exception of Manifesto, which I think is a very underrated album by the band, that had a real sense of edge and discovery. The one thing about Stranded is it's a band completely on top of what they do. They're controlling all of the elements, and Eno, of course, is still at this stage a random element. So what you have is a far greater sense of professionalism than on the first album when they're borrowing aspects of other bands. So, for example, The Bogus Man, which I think is one of the album's highlights, you can hear aspects of Fripp's atonality in the guitar. You can hear aspects of Jackie Leibzit's metronomic drumming. There's a Can reference point, I think, in Bogus Man. But actually, I think Roxy Music do Can better than Can, because I think...
Piffle. No one does Can as well as Can. But I take your point. I love the Roxy Music album, but no one does Can as well as Can. Anyway, carry on. As you were.
So several of my favourite pieces here. It has grandeur, it has playfulness, and it has a tremendous sense of thrilling experimental exoticism. And, In Every Dream Home a Heartache is perhaps my favourite Roxy piece of all time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think they're kind of pulling off the Bowie trick here, aren't they? And I say the Bowie trick, meaning they're making something that is simultaneously incredibly commercial and accessible, but at the same time couldn't be more experimental.
It's interesting you brought up Bowie, because I think at this stage, this is a better album overall than Bowie had done. Roxy Music are ahead in the game.
This is a better album than Bowie's album from this year, isn't it? Aladdin Sane.
It certainly is,
Yeah.
although Bowie's album has qualities. Aladdin Sane is something that I much prefer to Ziggy Stardust, because it's one of those syndromes where, an artist's most successful album and fan favourite quite often isn't mine. And I know that Ziggy Stardust is held up as a great achievement for Bowie. And of course, it's a very good album. It's a tremendous sounding album for its era. But I think it's Bowie at his least adventurous, certainly vocally, certainly lyrically, and certainly musically. Whereas Aladdin Sane may not be quite as coherent an album, but with the title track alone, you've got something that is venturing into new directions, in that case avant-garde free jazz.